Here is a review of Unit 2, Formative 1. The topics that this covers is the distributive property, factoring, and combining like terms. Remember that the distributive property means that you take the number outside of the parentheses and you multiply it by everything on the inside. So, on this first problem, 4 times the quantity h plus 8, I am going to take this 4 and multiply it by both terms on the inside. So first I'm going to multiply 4 times h, which the best way to write that is simply 4 next to h because that indicates multiplication. Then I'm going to take 4 times a positive 8, which is a positive 32, so I write that with an addition sign. So my final answer is 4h plus 32. The next one is negative 6 times the quantity n minus 3. Again, I just take that negative 6 and I multiply it by everything on the inside of parentheses. So first I take negative 6 times n, which is negative 6n. And then I take negative 6 times negative 3. Just think of that as a negative 6 and a negative 3. When you multiply two negatives, it ends up being positive. So the best way to write that is negative 6n plus 18. Now I'm going to back up and show you another way that you could do that, but it ends up being the same thing. So if you think of that as subtraction, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to do my negative 6 times n, which is negative 6n. But if you want to think of that as keeping the subtraction sign, that's fine. You can write the subtraction sign. But then you're looking at a negative 6 times 3, which is a negative 18. So you get negative 6n minus negative 18, which is not wrong, but there's a better way to write it because subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. So you would rewrite that as negative 6n plus 18 anyway, which, if you look, matches exactly what we had that first time if we think of that 3 as a negative 3. But again, both of them are correct. And the last example is 7 times the quantity 4 minus k. You do the same process. You take 7 times 4, which is 28, and then you have a subtraction sign, or think of it as a negative, and 7 times k would be 7k. So 28 minus 7k. And there you have distributed all three of those. The next topic in this unit is factoring algebraic expressions. This is going in reverse of the distributive property. Remember that distributing is multiplying, so factoring, since it's the reverse, is then dividing. So what you want to look for on this is you want to look for a common term that you can divide out of both. So if you look at 5x and 45, you might notice that you could divide 5 out of both of those. So you take your 5 and you put it outside of parentheses because that's what you're dividing. And then you simply write, what's left. So if you take 5x and divide it by 5, well, that 5 is gone, so you just get x. And then if you think of this as a negative 45 divided by 5 would leave you with negative 9. And so then your factored expression is 5 times the quantity x minus 9. Now remember, you could always go back and distribute to make sure that you get back to where you started from. You don't have to, but if it makes you feel better to know that you're doing it right, this is what you would do. You could distribute and you could say, okay, well, 5 times x is 5x, and a 5 times a negative 9 is minus 45. And if these two match, you know that your factored algebraic expression is correct. So I know that this is right because I checked it by distributing. Now the second example, negative 18m plus 27, again, look for something that you could divide out of both of those terms. And if I look at that, it looks like I can divide both of them by 3, but I could also divide them both by 9. And you always want to divide by, the largest factor that you can. And we don't really want to deal with a negative on our first term. So if there's a negative on that one, you really want to make sure that you factor out a negative. So instead of factoring 9, I'm going to divide out negative 9. And then that leaves me with, if I take a negative 18 divided by negative 9, that leaves me with a positive 2m. And then remember, I'm dividing a negative 9, so then I have to look at that as a positive 27 divided by a negative 9, which is a negative 3. So my factored expression would be negative 9 times the quantity 2m minus 3. And that's how you factor algebraic expressions. And the final topic in this first part of the unit is combining like terms. Remember that like terms are expressions with variables to exactly the same power. So it has to be n and n. It cannot be n squared and n. It can't be a whole number and an expression or a term with a variable. So what I would do is use those circles, squares, triangles, underlines, whatever it is. You can use different colored highlighters, anything to pick out those expressions with like terms. So this first one, I'm going to show you what it would look like if you highlight. And if you highlight, I would go through and highlight all of the like terms that you have. And if you notice, that's 3a and 5a. Those are like terms. They have the same variable to the same power. So then all you do is simply put those together. So if you have 3a's and 5a's, you combine it, and then you get a total of 8a. The second one is just a little tricky because people kind of forget that h. Now, if you were to put a number in front of it, which you never see, but if there was a number in front of it, it would look like 1h. So don't forget that if you see a variable alone, it's like having a 1 in front. So then if you add 1 plus 6, you get a total of 7h. And then you've combined those like terms. Now the next one, I have negative 6d plus 3d minus 4. I'm going to go ahead and circle my like terms. And I always include that operation symbol out front so I don't forget when I'm putting them together. So negative 4 is called a constant. That does not have a variable with it. So I'm going to put a green square around that one. So then I can go back and look, and it's very easy to see with those blue circles that my negative 6d and plus 3d, are like terms. So then I want to simplify those. I just want it to be one number. So if I have negative 6 plus 3, that equals negative 3d. And then since there's nothing to simplify that with, I just copy it down. So that simplified is negative 3d minus 4. Now my next one is a little bit longer, but I'm still going to use that trick of using circles and squares and triangles if I need to, all of my like terms. So I notice that my first one is 2x. So I'm going to circle 2x, and then I'm going to go through and look and see if I have any other x's. And I see some right here. And I want to include absolutely everything out in front of it, and right away I see subtracting a negative. And I know from Unit 1 that I don't really want to subtract negatives because it's easier to just change it to adding a positive. And I'm going to write that so I don't forget. And then if I look, I don't see any other terms with the variable x. So then I'm going to go check and see or highlight my other terms. And the next one that I have is y's. So I'm going to put a square around my negative 5y. Oh, and then I see this one is a matching term. So I'm going to put a square around that one. So then I'm going to go back, and it should be easy to see which ones go together. So first I'm going to start with my red, which are my x's. So then I'm going to do a positive 2x. And then remember, we changed this to adding a positive 4. So I have 2x plus 4x, which is 6x. And then I'm going to go look at my y's, and I have a negative 5y minus 12y, or you can think of it as having negative 5y and another negative 12y. But if you put negative 5 and negative 12 together, you get minus 17y. And then that is in simplified form, or you have combined your like terms. And finally, that last example, before I can combine like terms, I need to distribute. So I am going to distribute 6 times 3, which is 18. and 6 times a negative b, which is minus 6b. And then I'm just going to drop this because I haven't done anything with it yet. Once you've distributed, then you go back and you do the same process of looking for your like terms. And I notice my constant here, and I don't see any other whole numbers, so I leave that one. And then I go look at my b's.
Mrs. Castle, please stop by the office. Mrs. Castle.
I go look at my b's and I circle negative 6b and a positive 8b. Then I go back and I put my like terms together. I have nothing to combine with my 18, so I drop it. Then I look at my negative 6b plus 8b, and if I have negative 6 plus 8, that gives me a positive 2b. And then you are finished. Good luck and have a wonderful, wonderful day.